Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin.
And we are here to discuss Torah portion Shemini, which is found in Leviticus chapters 9, 10, and 11. And what a mixed bag of things these three chapters are. There's so much going on here.
Big topics.
Yes.
Sometimes confusing topics, right?
Yeah, but I'm always so fascinated every time I come to Shemini.
Right, and I hope that after our conversation, we'll all feel a little less intimidated by the bigness of the word that we're presented with here.
And the three chapters seem to have so little in connection with one another.
That's what I noticed.
Chapter 9 is about the priest, Aaron and his sons, have now been inaugurated and they begin the priestly service. God is so pleased. Fire comes out of the Holy of Holies, consumes the offerings on the altar. It's wonderful.
And then it goes south.
Then it'll go south. Chapter 10, Nadav and Avihu bring alien fire, Zara, to burn incense, and fire goes out from God a second time and consumes them. And all of a sudden, it's like, what a downer after the high of and excitement of this tabernacle now being used. Then the deaths of Aaron's two oldest sons.
I know. And it appears to be so harsh, and even...
It appears that way.
It seems like it's out of character of the guy that we've been talking about up until now, Grant. So I hope we can really dig down a little bit.
And then chapter 11 brings in the kosher laws. And it's like, what do those have to do with these first two chapters?
But
well,
there's
everything in the world. Everything. Yeah. So go ahead, Robin. How do you want to start this off?
You always ask me that, and I feel kind of put on the spot. But let's just jump in with the name Shemini.
Shemini.
Which obviously to some and not so obviously to others is the number 8.
Yes.
And this is the number 8 in lots of ways. It's the 8th day. It's time to consecrate the temple. And the number 8 always represents new life. We always read this portion at this time of year, which is, we're sitting here by our window and the trees are just bursting forth with new life and the birds are singing, and it's just a renewal. It's wonderful. And we all celebrated our Passover this past week and have this sense of new beginning and freedom and renewal.
And Shemini always is read either the week before Passover or the week after.
Absolutely important. The 8th day, we tend to look at Sundays as, the first day of the week, but really it's the 8th day, if you look at it as in following the 7th day, and we're supposed to bring that Sabbath rest and renewal into the 8th day for a new beginning.
Yeah. And we think of Yeshua's resurrection on the first day of the week. Well, it could say the 8th day. 8 is the number of new life.
It is. And the letter, of course, the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Het, means life. Right?
Exactly.
And I was thinking this week too that 8th day, if we look at it the way we're discussing right now, it kind of denotes transcendence, leaving the physical 7 days of the week that are on our paper calendars and transcending to an 8th new beginning. Yes. It's like that in-between time thing. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
It's really cool.
Well, you think of some of the 8s in the Bible. There were 8 souls on the ark. So after mankind was wiped out by the flood, how many souls does God start over with? 8.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And we can't forget, of course, in the book of Luke, it's in the 2nd chapter, we see the description of Miriam and Joseph bringing their baby, Yeshua, at the 8th day, his brit, and there's Simeon in the temple. And it's like this fresh, amazing beginning for the world, because he says, now I have seen. Now the world has seen new light and new hope.
That's right.
May your servant depart in peace.
Yes, because a baby boy is always circumcised on the 8th day of life. And I don't think it's a coincidence that on the 8th day, the Shemini, Yeshua is blessed by Shimon, the same letters. and Shimon's name are used in Shemini. And but anyways, maybe it's just a coinkydink.
Well, another thing that I don't think is a coincidence, it's brought out by Karen Pryor in her lovely book, A Taste of Torah, which I enjoy each week. She talks about how the word olah, which obviously refers to the things that we've been discussing, going up, the offerings, the whole burnt offering, and then the word orlah refers to the foreskin that is cut away. In other words, the flesh that is removed in order to bring new life. So there's this interesting connection between the 8th day, circumcision, new life, and getting rid of the obstruction and the flesh that's going to interfere with what God wants to bring forth, which I guess really does bring us to the next topic of
Yes.
We have to talk about Nadav and Avihu.
Yeah, one of the things we have to understand is that Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's 2 oldest sons, were holy men.
They were so esteemed.
Yes, and they were on the mountain with Moses and Aaron and the 70 elders when God had his covenant meal with them. And they saw God, it says there in Exodus, and they ate with him.
It's so critical to understand that they saw him, they heard him, they knew.
These were
They
priests.
weren't misstepping or goofing up. They knew.
But with that said, holy men, wise men, educated men, men of renown can also operate in the flesh. And how they can act out of character. I mean, we see this with so many of the great men of the Bible. I think of David because this last week I was teaching about his sin with Bathsheba. Here he was, the greatest king of Israel, just an amazing king and a man after God's own heart, and yet he could fall so fast and so hard.
Well, even, Peter, at the end of the day, he had walked with Yeshua and knew him, and right at the end of the day, he kind of faltered and said, I don't know him.
Yes.
What is it with our tendency to falter at the finish line? We often have a hard time finishing strong.
Well,
I think maybe, and then I'll let you comment, but I've been thinking about this a lot because it is a human tendency. I think we lean on divine strength and wisdom, and then we start to assume that it's our strength and wisdom, and we take our eye off of what the essence of what we're doing is, and it kind of becomes about us for a moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But there's another thought that came to me as I was thinking about these things, and that is to maintain spiritual alertness and spiritual freedom and to walk in the Spirit, we must constantly be pouring energies into it. It's like a fire that must continually be fed.
We can't just get slack thinking that we're on a roll and yesterday's inspiration and connection with God is going to carry us through.
It's like I was reminded of a very wise man a few years ago talking about the freedom we enjoy in the United States. But that freedom and that recognition of our freedoms through our Constitution has to be something that has to always be fed and maintained and supported, because the moment you start to take it for granted, the entire society begins to slide back. And we see that really going on today. We have not fed the flames of liberty. We've not fed the flames of personal responsibility.
That's the key. It's the personal responsibility, which is other-oriented, becomes something that we turn inward, and we forget what we started out to serve, and we begin to serve ourselves.
This is what we find in so many marriages that start off with these red hot romances, and these the deep love and commitment during the engagement period. Then they have the wedding. And then it's like once the guy has won the girl and there are rings on her finger and a marriage contract is signed, then he just becomes complacent. Well, I got what I wanted, now I can sit back and relax.
And
No.
and let's just see what makes me happy. And she's thinking, well, what can he do to make me happy? And then it all flips inside out. Well, Nadav,
it starts off with what I can do for you, then turns into what you can do for me.
Exactly. And we do that with our walk with God.
We do.
And somewhere along the line, Nadav and Avihu must have really forgotten the whole purpose of their service, and they fell into apparent drunkenness and just real sloppiness.
Yeah. Well, we see three possibilities. It could be one or two, or it could be all three of them. And one of them definitely is pointed out that what they did is they brought Zara, strange fire, alien fire. It's right there at the beginning of chapter 10. The sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan.
So not God's, but his own?
Right.
Okay.
They put fire in them and placed incense upon it, and they brought before Adonai Zara that he had not commanded. In fact, he had commanded not to bring. So a fire came forth from before Adonai and consumed them. They died before Adonai. So the fire for the incense in the holy place, that fire had to come from the altar.
Right.
And then you brought hot coals in, you use that to light the incense and to light the menorah.
And they
at night.
knew that.
They knew that. But they brought their own fire pans, their own incense apparently, and their fire source was something different. They got too casual.
You know what just struck me? It wasn't one of them or the other, but they influenced one another. One of them probably was the influencer and said, hey, let's do it this way.
Yeah.
And that's a pattern.
So how did they fall into that? Well, there's a hint given in verse 8. Because immediately after this, Adonai spoke to Aaron, saying, do not drink intoxicating wine, you and your sons with you, when you come to the tent of meeting, that you not die. So apparently, Nadav and Avihu had been drinking, been celebrating because, hey, we're priests, we've done this, we're inaugurated, it's all official, let's party.
We're home free.
Yeah.
Let's do what we feel like doing.
And then the third thing, and the hint for this, is found in chapter 16, when God tells Aaron that through Moses that you don't come just at any time you want into the Holy of Holies. And then he gives them the Yom Kippur service, which shows the high priest how he gets to come into God's presence. So it's assumed that Nadav and Avihu thought, hey, let's just go on into the Holy of Holies. We're God's pals. We're his amigos. And they got a little too familiar.
Yeah.
You know, I keep seeing this theme of holiness. And the word holy, kadosh, simply means set apart. And I see, for example, Moses, when he draws near to the burning bush. He gets closer, 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 and finally God says, stop. It's close enough. Take your shoes off. This is holy ground. And so when you come to the tabernacle, you can go in the courtyard. It's close enough. If you're a priest, you go to the holy place. That's close enough. Only the high priest can go into the Holy of Holies for a short period of time. That's it, once a year. And so we set God apart by drawing near, but we have to know exactly where that point is where we say, I can't go any closer yet. It's like an engagement period. When we were engaged, all we wanted to do is be with each other, and we come close, but it's like, we're not married yet. So there's a certain place we have to stop until we're married. That final intimacy is not permitted. And so that's kind of where we're at now. God wants us to come close, but don't come any closer because you will violate a barrier that I've established.
You're not ready. Well, the divine standard is always motivated by his love and his kindness. And it's always other-oriented toward our good.
Yes.
And at a glance, it's hard to imagine how Aaron's two sons being struck down like this could have possibly been for everyone's good. And I was thinking so much about this because, Grant, it feels so extreme. But like you and I have discussed, they knew they were connected in a way to the source of this whole temple worship. They had encountered God very, very intimately.
Yes.
And this was the first example for the world to see of how this was to be done. And I started thinking about how the point of origin for a trajectory is essential. If it's like the slightest bit off, when an airplane leaves the ground, the instruments have to be spot on, because the slightest degree of deviation from the exact perfect measurement, they're going to end up so far from where they intended to land. And that might sound like a silly example, but God said, this is my divine standard.
Yes.
And it has to be done according to my way, because this shows the world who I am. And it was violated. And we might think, okay, so they made a small mistake, but it wasn't just a small mistake.
No, it wasn't.
And if he would have let it go, there would be no divine standard.
No.
Does that make sense?
Exactly, it does. And I know daily in my life, I have to make what I call mid-course corrections. Realize, I need to adjust my trajectory here so I can keep going the direction God wants.
For whom much is given,
much is expected.
That keeps coming into my mind as well. When you know stuff, you can't unknow it, and you have a higher degree of responsibility than maybe people who don't know.
That's right.
And they knew.
Well, before we started recording, I shared with you that I believe the key verses for the entire book of Leviticus. Now, you've got 5 books of the Torah. The middle one's Leviticus. It's the middle branch of the menorah. It holds everything up. It's the book of holiness. And I believe that the key verses to Leviticus are here in chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. We read about do not drink intoxicating wine when you come into the tent of the meeting, that you not die.
Yes.
This is an eternal decree for generations. Then verse 10, chapter 10, verse 10. In order to distinguish between the holy and the common,
right,
between the contaminated and the pure.
Yes.
And to teach the children of Israel all the decrees that Adonai had spoken to them through Moses. Now, we're to be a kingdom of priests. So as a kingdom of priests, we need to make sure we are not under the influence of anything intoxicating. Now, that's easy to say. Okay, I don't get drunk on wine, and I don't do drugs. Got it. But we can be intoxicated by the culture, by money, by our power. Our emotions are a big one. We can be intoxicated by different kinds of theology, following different teachers. We can be intoxicated with our position in our redeemed community. And when we cannot distinguish between what is set apart to God and what is common. We have to distinguish, or else we'll treat the holy like the common and treat the common as if it's holy.
Right.
And between what's contaminated and what's pure. I'm amazed at how many believers can't tell the difference between what is tainted by the world and what is pure.
Well, do any of us know exactly? We should know, but it's not until we meet him face to face that we see perfectly clearly. Right. But once again, to the degree that he has told us what is pure, we need to be responsible.
Yes. And
Correct?
The longer we walk with him,
the more we know.
The more we mature. And this is why young believers need to find a mentor, an older believer, who's been walking and is stable in their walk. And
not perfect.
Yeah, so we don't make this mistake.
But stable.
There are 2 places in the Bible where it says, and fire went out from Adonai and consumed. 2 places where that Hebrew phrase is found exactly. And those 2 places are in our Torah portion. In chapter 9, the fire of God's pleasure went out to consume the sacrifices. And in 10, the fire of God's displeasure went out to consume Nadav and Avihu.
Right.
Same fire.
Right.
But the results are completely different. One brought great joy and to the people and glory to God. And the other brought great sorrow to the people And even to God's heart too, I'm convinced.
Well, there's so much about their what motivated them that we can't know, but God reveals enough that we can have a pretty strong idea that they brought their own way, and they were meeting personal needs more than honoring Him.
Yes.
There's a quote by Rabbitzin Youngress, I think that is so relevant. She says, "Our God is one, our Torah is one, and our worship must mirror that oneness. It cannot be based on our personal needs and emotions."
That's right.
I read that over and over this week. It's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
We can get so drunk on our own feelings and our own emotions, and they'll mislead us every time, almost every time.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm anxious to move on to not only what happened to the two of them, but the response of Aaron.
Well, before we do that,
Okay.
I want to share a secret that I discovered just this morning.
Absolutely.
That I think is fascinating. This Aish Zara, this alien fire, is mentioned 3 times in the Bible. Once here in Leviticus, it says they brought this Aish Zara. Aish is fire, Aleph Shin, fire. Zara means alien or strange. So it's mentioned once here in our Torah portion. And then it's referred to twice again in book of Numbers, both times in regards to Nadav and Avihu. They brought this Aish Zara. Now, if you add the letter Hey to the word Aish, so it becomes Aleph Shin Hey, it's Isha, woman.
What? Right.
And 3 times in the Bible, all in Proverbs, we read about an Isha Zara.
Right.
So they brought Aish Zara, strange fire. Then Proverbs warns us against the Isha Zara, the alien or strange woman, the
And
seductress.
She's an adulteress.
Now, there's no question in my mind whatsoever that God put these 3 Aish Zaras in the Torah and the 3 Isha Zaras in Proverbs, because with the difference of 1 letter, they're the same phrase.
Yes.
Because the one speaks to the other. The Isha Zara is a woman who could have been someone's wife. She could have been a mother. She could have been
Honored.
wonderful. But instead, she became a seductress. And she pulled people down. And she would be destructive to young men. And so I think when we think about the Isha Zara, the alien woman, the seductress, it gives us a little bit of a glimpse to the Nadav and Avihu's hearts, that they were seduced into destruction.
Yes.
And the strange fire they brought because they wanted sensations. What is the only thing that Isha Zara has to offer?
Yeah.
Pleasure,
Right.
sensation, and experience.
Yeah. Very temporary and
we
very
need to be-
destructive.
we need to be very, very careful that we are not seduced into misusing our service to God as a way of getting pleasure for ourselves, to esteeming ourselves, drawing attention to ourselves, to building ourselves up. Our service to God needs to be pure and holy, not common.
And that makes it make so much sense, Grant, why God had to make a very clear display of why that is just not okay.
Yes. So if we can do what chapter 10, verse 10 says and apply it to our own emotions, to distinguish between what is holy and what is common and profane. Because some of my emotions, some of my motives are holy. But I can easily take a holy motive and turn it and say, you know what, I hope people are watching me do this service to God. Now it's not about Him anymore.
And
It's about me.
We forget what it's all about.
Yeah, and I don't distinguish between what's contaminated and what's pure. It's so easy to take a pure motive and then contaminate it with fleshly desires.
And that doesn't
pleasures.
mean that we don't bring our individuality and our creativity
Of
to the
course.
way we walk out His truth in this world.
Right.
Because I don't want any of us to walk away thinking that we have to walk in fear and trepidation, that if we accidentally misstep, we're going
Of
to
course,
be
God's so
struck
gracious
down.
and good. But we need to be careful that we're not seduced.
And when we know something,
And, yeah.
we have to know how to keep
That's
living
right.
it out, right?
That's right.
So can we talk about silence?
Yeah, I know. That really struck you this week.
It struck me so much because as a parent, watching this happen, the expectations were so high, everybody's gathered, and suddenly this unexpected, terrible disaster takes place, and Aaron becomes silent.
Yeah.
He just doesn't rail, he doesn't question, he doesn't complain, he doesn't say how unfair, he just remains silent, which tells us a lot about Aaron. Because deep down, he knew.
Yes.
And his heart had to have been broken.
Oh my goodness.
But he didn't allow his words to bring discouragement and to undo what God was establishing in front of the people. And I've read that the Midrash tells us that on that day, their mother, whose name was Elisheva, she was also silent. So come on. I mean, for him to be silent is one thing, but for their mother to remain silent, she knew. And you know, what we tend to do is, you know, when something happens in our kids, suddenly make a display that they've forgotten who they are and who God is. There tends to be self-recrimination and blame and doubt, and for them to just stand silent, Grant, I'm so impressed. And it reminded me of one of my favorite, but I don't remember it often enough in my own life. One of my favorite sayings is that silence is a protective fence for wisdom.
Yes.
And every stinking time I violate that, I regret it. And I keep thinking, I'm going to do better, I'm going to do better. But it's so true. And until we know that our words are something that's going to give life and encouragement, just be quiet.
Yes.
Silence is so underrated. We live in a world that is telling us, give voice to your feelings and you have a right to tell people how you feel. What a bunch of bunk that is.
Yes. So true.
Right?
Oh, yes. So true.
I read another amazing thing by Rabbi Gabriel. It says, in seeking wisdom, the first step is silence. The second is listening. The third, remembering. The fourth, practicing. The fifth, teaching others. But we turn it backwards and we start talking about stuff and trying to show other people how to do things before we've gone through the silence and the listening and the remembering and the practicing ourselves. Isn't that profound?
It is. It certainly is. You know, while you're talking, it somehow reminded me, and this is the verse where it says, and Aaron was silent. It's in chapter 10, verse 3. It says, Moses said to Aaron, of this did Adonai speak, saying, I will be set apart through those who are nearest to me. Thus I will be honored before the entire people. And Aaron was silent.
Wow.
You know, you wonder, why is it the people around us in our culture do not honor God the way they should? It's because God has not been sanctified, not been set apart through those who are nearest to him.
Right.
But so many times those who are nearest to God, who've drawn close, have had intimate experience with God, they want to blab about everything and treat God casually. Oh yeah, God and I hang out and I talk to God and yeah, he's my pal, my amigo, my comrade, and yeah, we're buddies. And they treat God with such casualness and familiarity that he's not honored among the people around us either. You know, we shouldn't be stuffy and legalistic, but we should walk about with us with a holy awe of God, that we love God, recognize his loving kindness in our lives, but people should see that we have a holy respect for God. And if the world sees us truly honoring God this way, then they might honor God more in their own lives as well.
You know, I hear you, but you know the times that are hardest for me to be silent, honestly, are those times when I feel misjudged and misunderstood, or even accused of something that I know isn't fair. And that's when I feel so justified in stating what is right and what is true and how I'm looking at things and don't think this. And you know what comes to me, Grant, is that passage in Isaiah 53 where it describes our Messiah being led like a lamb to slaughter, being accused falsely, completely misunderstood to a degree that none of us can imagine. And yet, what was his response?
He was silent.
He
did not open his mouth.
He did not open his mouth. It wasn't because he didn't know that there was plenty to say that would completely set people straight, because those people couldn't be set straight.
Yeah.
They weren't in a position to hear.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's truly amazing.
So, silence, something to work on for sure. There's another proverb. It says, "The wise in heart accept commands, but a babbling fool comes to ruin." And I was thinking of the contrast. And at some point, those sons of Aaron became foolish enough that they forgot the commands. But even their father, watching all this happen, knew enough to not become a babbling fool.
Yeah.
He remained silent.
That's right.
And he stepped back into his role, didn't he?
That's right. He did. Yeah, I don't think we give Aaron his due as much as we should.
I know.
And we always remember the golden calf and how he messed up there. But
it's amazing.
It's like he had his downfall early on, and then he really grew in his maturity.
Well, we don't have much time left. The rest of our portion.
We teased people with the kosher laws
I
know. A little
bit. Let's at least touch on it before we wrap up today.
Well, again, that key verse is to distinguish between the sacred and the common. Now, if I have two pieces of meat here, one of those it's a piece of sacrificial meat, and the other one isn't. Can you tell by looking at them which is which? No, because the difference between the sacred and the common is a completely spiritual one. But the difference between the contaminated and the pure, that's something that's obvious.
Right.
If a piece of flesh is rotten, or if a piece of flesh is from a snake or something else, then you can look at it and I'm not eating that. But this over here, this is pure. This is something that is eaten. So the one is something that's distinguished only spiritually, and the other one is distinguished physically. And so it's interesting that this whole discussion is then followed by the kosher laws, which tells us how to distinguish animals that are permitted and animals are not permitted for food. Fish that are permitted, fish that aren't permitted.
Birds.
And birds, and even some kinds of insects and creepy things. But at the end of the kosher laws, it says in verse 44, "For I am Adonai your God, and you are to sanctify yourselves, set yourselves apart, and you shall become holy, for I am holy." Right. You need to be set apart because I'm set apart. You need to live a life like mine. And he's telling us, since you are a set apart people, and I have taken up residence within you, you need to treat your tabernacles, your temples, as holy things. You don't bring unholy things, unclean things into your temples.
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about. Eating in our world is most about self-gratification and what I want to enjoy on my tongue at the moment.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And so we completely forget that eating is more than about just how something tastes for the moment.
Right.
It has to be something that is blessed and will nourish us. And there's a whole lot more to be said on the subject, obviously.
Well, I think it was Rabbi Ginsburg, don't quote me on that, but he was talking about how taste is experienced in the mouth, but hunger is experienced in the stomach.
Right.
And so if we eat because we want pleasure in our mouths, then we're going to become gluttons.
Right.
But if we eat to satisfy hunger in our stomachs, then we're not going to be gluttonous, but we still derive all the pleasure of the taste. But we need to be motivated by the stomach because it tells us when we're hungry. Our mouths don't.
And God's divine standards protect us from ingesting something that's going to be harmful.
That's right.
Both physically and spiritually.
Exactly right, yes.
Isn't it fascinating that this whole portion deals with the mouth? I mean, we talk about speech and what comes out, and then we're talking about be careful about what you put in.
The sacrificial foods, Well, we can't close. We'll just put this as the cherry on top. If, of course, I'm not sure. Maybe the cherry is the only part here that people will find worthy.
It's a kosher cherry.
I don't know. We don't know. We sit here and talk and enjoy ourselves and hope that people derive some spiritual benefit from it. But in chapter 10, in verse 16, it says, Moses inquired insistently or diligently inquired. In Hebrew, it's darosh, darash. Searching, he searched. These two words, darosh, darash, they're spelled exactly the same. Dalet resh shin, dalet resh shin. These are the two middle words of the Torah.
Say that again. That is so cool.
Yeah. Darosh, darash. Searching, he searched.
So if you take the Torah and you count from the beginning and the end.
And from the end, you come to these two words, which are the same.
Wow.
He diligently searched. So the very heart of the Torah, the two middle words of the Torah are searching, he searched. And that is what our heart should be. We should be searching out the Torah, hearing God's voice, seeking out what he wants to say to us, how he wants to change us, and what he wants to do through us.
And that's the point.
Because the Torah is our food.
It's pure.
It's our spiritual nourishment.
Right.
So we need to feed the fire with holy food. Yeah.
Good stuff. Grant.
All right. Well, we went over, but that's kind of traditional, isn't it? So,
there was too much.
That's way too much. Well, anyways, until next time, we hope there's been something here that you found a benefit as a blessing to you. But until the next time, we wish you shalom.
Shalom, everyone.
And God bless.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.